नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Hare Krishna. Starting from today, we will discuss the enchanting pastimes of Krishna that he has performed in the Dwaraka Dham. For the last several days, we have been discussing all the pastimes of Krishna that he had performed in Vrindavan Dham and Mathura Dham. And today, we will discuss how Krishna transferred himself and his other devotees from Mathura Dham to Dwaraka Dham, and how he had erected the fort of Dwaraka. And from tomorrow onwards, we will discuss various pastimes that he has performed in Dwarka. And Krishna, after killing Kamsa, he has consoled his parents, Devaki and Vasudev, and also Krishna has established Ugrasena as the king of Mathura. And Krishna has consoled Nanda Maharaj, and he had sent Nanda Maharaj back to this Vrindavan Dham. And after that, Krishna continued to stay in Mathura. And Krishna's dearmost friend and cousin was Uddhava. And Uddhava is so attached to Krishna, he resembled Krishna in his bodily form. And also, Uddhava would wear Krishna's dress and Krishna's ornaments and Krishna's garlands. So, thus, he looked almost like Krishna, and he is the closest associate of Krishna in Mathura. So once Krishna called Uddhava and he requested Uddhava, can you please go to Vrindavan Dham and console my parents and give my message to my beloved gopis? And Uddhava went to Vrindavan Dham, and he had spent a couple of months there to relish Krishna Katha in the association of all Vrajavasis. He spoke various qualities and activities of Krishna in front of all the Vrajavasis, and he has heard all the loving pastimes that Krishna has performed in Vrindavan Dham from the Vrajavasis. So after a few months of stay there, this Uddhava has come back to Mathura, and Krishna sat with Uddhava, and then he has heard all the incidents that had happened in Vrindavan during Uddhava's stay there. So after some time, Krishna wanted to please his devotees. As soon as Krishna came from Vrindavan to Mathura, Akrura, who brought Krishna to Mathura, he requested Krishna, Krishna, can you please come to my house? And when Krishna was doing a tour of Mathura, he met a hunchback woman named Kubja, and Krishna received very beautiful, fragrant ointments and sandalwood pulp from this Kubja, and Krishna has straightened her back. At that time, Kubja also invited Krishna to her house. So Krishna promised her, I cannot come to your house right now, but I will come to your house later. And Krishna also promised Akrura that he can come to Akrura's house also later after killing Kamsa. Now that Krishna has killed Kamsa and he has settled Ugrasena and Vasudeva and Devaki, and his education under Sandipani Muni has also been completed. So now Krishna started thinking, how do I please my devotees? I have promised Akrura, I have promised Kubja that I would go to their houses and then give them some mercy. So Krishna took Uddhava and he went to the house of Kubja. And Kubja became so happy and received Krishna and welcomed Krishna with great love and affection. And then Krishna blessed Kubja with his wonderful divine transcendental association and fulfilled all the desires of Kubja that she has been longing since a long time. Since her previous birth as Surpanakha, Kubja has been longing for the association of Krishna, and Krishna has now fulfilled her desire now in Mathura. And after that, Krishna took Uddhava and then he went to Akrura's house also. And Akrura has been waiting for Krishna to come to his house. And Krishna blessed Akrura, and Akrura offered several fervent, heartfelt devotional prayers to Krishna, glorified Krishna in various ways, and expressed his deep, loving service attitude towards Krishna. So Krishna was very pleased with Akrura's prayers, and Krishna ordered Akrura, "My dear Akrura, I have one service for you." Akrura said, "My dear Lord, I am at your service. You tell me, you order me. What am I supposed to do?" And Krishna told Akrura, "Akrura, can you please go to Hastinapur? In Hastinapur, my aunt Kunti Devi is there, and her children, her sons, Pandavas, this Yudhishthir Maharaj, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadev, they are also staying there in Hastinapur. And in Hastinapur, the current king is Dhritarashtra, and Dhritarashtra was more in favor of his own sons, Duryodhan, Dushashan, and others. So Dhritarashtra was partial towards his own sons, and Dhritarashtra was showing some inattention and indifference, and in fact even cruelty towards his nephews, the Pandavas. So supporting his sons, Dhritarashtra is constantly planning so many things against the Pandavas. So can you please go and find out the welfare of Kunti Devi and Pandavas, and if possible you can even give some counseling to Dhritarashtra. Then Akrura said, "Okay, fine, I will go. My dear Lord, this is your order." Akrura went all the way to Hastinapur. And when Akrura went to Hastinapur, Akrura is such a gentlemanly devotee that he is welcomed and loved by Kunti Devi and Vidura and Pandavas and all the other people in Hastinapur. And they welcomed Akrura so nicely. And then Kunti Devi expressed all her anguish and pain in front of Akrura. So how she is being tormented by all the Kauravas, and how her sons were being tormented and troubled in various ways by Dhritarashtra, Duryodhan, Dushasan, Shakuni, and all these people. And she expressed her deep anguish, and Akrura consoled her. And after that, Akrura went to Dhritarashtra. He stayed there for a while, and Akrura went to Dhritarashtra and then told, "My dear Dhritarashtra, you are a king. A king is supposed to have equal vision to all his citizens. If this is the equanimity that a king is supposed to maintain towards all his citizens, what to speak of having an equal vision towards your own sons and the sons of your brother, your nephews? You are unable to see your own sons and sons of your brother equally. Where is the possibility that you can see all your citizens equally? It is not good to be partial towards your own sons. It's not proper." Then when Akrura told like this, then Dhritarashtra apparently appreciated the advices of Akrura, and he said, "Akrura, you are a noble person, and what you said is true, but there's not much that I can do in this regard." The reason is, Dhritarashtra says, I have, I am really affectionate towards my own son, and because of my undue deep affection towards my son Duryodhana, I am obliged to, and I am like very weak-hearted. So I am obliged to support my son Duryodhan. So I am unable to give up this affection. I can understand that something wrong is happening, but still I have become a puppet in the hands of my own affection towards my son. I won't be able to do much. Your instructions are so great that they are like lightning, but they cannot stay in my heart, which is like cloud. How long does lightning stay in cloud? Just for one moment. Similarly, Dhritarashtra's appreciation for Akrura's advices is also like that only. When somebody appreciates an advice, an instruction, or a suggestion, he would implement it. But Dhritarashtra only appreciated his suggestion, but he did not implement it. He had no inclination to implement it also, because he became so affectionate towards his own son, and because of that affection he is behaving in a very unjust manner towards his nephews. And Dhritarashtra says that it is my destiny, what can I do? So because of destiny, because of fate, and because of the will of providence, things have been set in motion in a certain way, and now I cannot intervene and then change those things. So in this way, Dhritarashtra denies any responsibility for whatever is happening in his kingdom, for all the injustice that is happening towards the Pandavas. And this is the important point, important lesson that we can identify here. That destiny is not our action. Destiny is the result of our action. So it's not that we do something because of our own destiny. When we do something, whatever results that we get, whatever reactions we get, that is destiny. One cannot blame destiny. When one has an opportunity to behave in a right manner, if still, if the person chooses to behave in a wrong manner, then he creates a bad destiny for oneself. So one should not say that I am doing this bad activity because of my own destiny, because of my own fate. No, every time one has an opportunity to behave in a responsible manner, one has to take responsibility for one's own actions. Dhritarashtra denied that responsibility. So, learning from this blind king, Dhritarashtra, we need to be very careful in avoiding bad things and then trying to do good things when we have an opportunity to do things. There are some circumstances where we may not be able to do something, although we think that this is more appropriate thing to do. So then things are beyond our control. When the situation is beyond one's control, one may have to surrender to the circumstances. But when things are under his control, still a person denies responsibility and then says, "It's all whatever I'm doing is because of destiny," then he's an irresponsible person. And Dhritarashtra could not behave in a proper, just manner. And Krura tried to advise Dhritarashtra, but like he is not a person who can listen to others. And certainly we cannot minimize or offend Dhritarashtra also, because Dhritarashtra is playing an important role in the Lord's pastimes, and Dhritarashtra even knows that the Supreme Lord has descended in the form of Krishna in the Yadu dynasty to annihilate all miscreants and to protect the righteous people. And Dhritarashtra also knows that Pandavas are righteous and his own sons, Duryodhan, Dushashan, and all these people are not righteous. They are not virtuous. So miscreants will be punished by the Lord and righteous people will be protected by the Lord. And this fact is known to Dhritarashtra, and he offered a prayer to the Lord. So I offer my respectful obeisances to that Lord who has descended to accomplish these purposes. So definitely Dhritarashtra must be having a great spiritual understanding about the Lord to be able to offer such a wonderful prayer. But still, he could not take the right and appropriate action because his own son was so obstinate, was so selfish. And Akrura tried to counsel Dhritarashtra, but he could not do much. And then he came back to Mathura and reported to Krishna whatever had happened in Hastinapur. Then Krishna understood the situation there, and Krishna continued to do his other leelas. Then one day Krishna will go to Hastinapur also and address the situation there. But currently he's focusing on his own relationships with the Mathuravasis, and he has to reduce the burden of the earth while sitting in Mathura also. Krishna reduced the burden of earth by killing so many demons in Vrindavan, and he shifted from Vrindavan to Mathura. And in Mathura also, Krishna kills some demons and then he reduces the burden of earth. And after that, he focuses on other places. And he goes to Hastinapur, and through Pandavas, his beloved devotees, he reduces the burden of earth furthermore, and especially in the Kurukshetra war. Now Krishna continued to stay in Mathura Dham along with his parents Vasudeva and Devaki, along with his elder brother Balaramji, and then along with the ruler Ugrasena and many other Yadus and Vrishnis. So as Krishna is staying there, once Jarasandha came to attack Krishna and Balaram in Mathura. Because Jarasandha was the king of Magadha, and Jarasandha's two daughters, Asti and Prapti, married Kamsa. And once from Jarasandha's camp, a huge elephant named Kuvalayapida came towards Kamsa. And Kamsa lifted that Kuvalayapida elephant and threw him 80 miles away. Then Jarasandha was impressed with the great power and courage and strength of Kamsa, and Jarasandha was pleased to offer his two daughters Asti and Prapti to this powerful king Kamsa. And then in that way, Kamsa was the son-in-law of Jarasandha. And when Kamsa was killed by Krishna, Asti and Prapti became so morose and they went to their father's house. Asti and Prapti went to Jarasandha's house, and then they told Jarasandha, see, your son-in-law Kamsa has been killed by that cowhead boy Krishna and Balaram. So Jarasandha was extremely envious and angry upon Krishna and Balaram. He was always waiting for a opportune moment. When would I attack Mathura? When will I kill this Krishna and Balaram? When will I take revenge for the death of my son-in-law Kamsa? And Jarasandha came all the way to Mathura. And he came with 23 Akshohinis of army. He came with a huge army. And Jarasandha was a very materialistic, selfish, and demoniac person. He's not a very righteous person. So he's a great king, definitely, and he is very charitable to the Brahmanas. But he had so many selfish intentions and very cruel mentality, and he has been supporting this Kamsa, who is also a demoniac and materialistic person. So he gathered similarly demoniac people, and he gathered 23 Akshohinis of army. So 23 Akshohinis of army means that one Akshohini of army would contain 21,870 chariots and 21,870 elephants and 1,09,350 soldiers and 65,610 horses. So this is the count of one Akshohini of army. In this way, Jarasandha has gathered 23 Akshohinis of armies and then attacked Mathura Dham. And with 23 Akshohinis of armies, when Jarasandha came to Mathura, and Krishna and Balaram came to know that Jarasandha has attacked Mathura, and these are the two warriors, powerful warriors, Krishna and Balaram. They are very young, but still they have the responsibility to protect Mathura Dham and Mathura Vasis from this Jarasandha's attack. So Krishna and Balaram just started thinking. Krishna said, Krishna spoke to Balaram, my dear Lord, my dear brother, we have descended onto this earthly planet to reduce the burden of earth. So the purpose of Krishna's descents are described in Bhagavad Gita also. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya cha sadhunam, to protect righteous people and virtuous people, devotees, and vinashaya cha dushkritam, to punish miscreants, to punish people who are very materialistic and selfish and demoniac in nature, and dharma samsthapanarthaya, to also establish dharma, the religious principles, dharmic principles, what is good and what is bad. So Krishna would descend in the form of a human being in this world in different yugas. So Krishna told Balaramji, now it is the time for us to punish the miscreants and protect the righteous people. So Krishna has been doing it in Vrindavan Dham also. Now Krishna will do it in a much larger scale. So far Krishna has been attacked by some demons. So the demon is coming alone inside an innocent form like Vatsasur, Bhakasur, Aghasur, Putana, Keshi, Trinavarta, Vyomasura. So like that, so many demons came and Krishna killed them in a fight. So it's like 1-to-1 fight. So Krishna was fighting with some demon. Now 23 Akshohinis of army came. So it's not like a fight that Krishna does in Vrindavan. In Vrindavan, Krishna killed so many demons without compromising on his childhood mood. He was still maintaining his mood and form as a small child only, and he effortlessly killed so many demons while playing as a child. So he just lifted Vatsasura demon and then twirled him around and then threw him on Kapitha tree, and Kapitha fruits fell down, and all the children went and picked up Kapitha fruits and they started eating the Kapitha fruits. So like that, as a play, Krishna has killed so many demons. And later Krishna and Balaramji killed Dhenukasur. So Balaramji also threw Dhenukasur on this palm tree, and then so many tala fruits just came down. So in this way, Krishna and Balaram killed so many demons in Vrindavan without compromising on their playful, childish activities, attitude. Now, Krishna and Balaram are not children now. They are warriors. They are princes. So Krishna is playing the role of a prince in Mathura city, not a cowhead boy in Vrindavan village. So that is, they are village pastimes which are much sweeter, and um, these are the pastimes in Mathura city pastimes, which are filled with so much of majesty and grandeur and power and opulence. So now Krishna will not uh, fight with his 23 Akshohinis of armies as if he were fighting with some demons who came to attack him in Vrindavan. Krishna has to do it in a much more organized manner. He has to have a chariot. He has to have a chariot driver. He has to have horses. He has to have very sophisticated weapons. So Krishna did not use any weapons to kill all the demons that he had killed in Vrindavan. Now Krishna has to use some weapons. He was discussing with Balaramji. My dear Balaram, the purpose of our descent would be fulfilled henceforth. It has been fulfilled to a certain degree till now. So now onwards we have to kill all the miscreants and punish the miscreants and reduce the burden of earth in a much more organized and sophisticated manner. So Krishna looked towards the heavens, towards the sky, and Krishna meditated. Then a divine transcendental chariot appeared there, and it was shining with golden effulgence. And this chariot appeared along with horses. And as Krishna continued to meditate, some divine weapons also manifested there. Krishna's Saranga bow came, and his armor came, and his khadga, his sword came. Sword, shield, Kaumodaki Gada also appeared. Sudarshan Chakra also appeared. So Krishna's Shanka, Chakra, and Gada, and Saranga bow, and arrows, and quivers, and chariot, and sword, and shield, everything manifested. And Balaramji's plow also has appeared. So in this way, Krishna and Balaram are equipped with divine transcendental weapons. And these weapons are also personalities. Sudarshan Chakra, you may find that this is a weapon only, but Sudarshan is also a personality. Sudarshan also has senses. Sudarshan also would hear our prayers. Sudarshan also can protect by the will of the Lord. Once a great king named Ambarish Maharaj invited Durvasa Muni to take some prasad in his house, and Durvasa Muni went to take bath, and meanwhile this Ambarish Maharaj, who has been fasting, he had to break his fast, and the auspicious time to break fast is like passing by. So now Ambarish Maharaj thought it wise to just break his fast even before Durvasa Muni comes, and it's an offense to the guest if he breaks his fast before Durvasa Muni comes. But he will lose the benefit of doing this Ekadashi Vrata if he does not break fast in the right parent time. So it is considered that if you take some water, your fast is not broken, still your fast is broken also. So Ambarish Maharaj just took little water. Then Durvasa Muni came, and with his mystic power he understood that Ambarish Maharaj has taken some water, and Durvasa Muni considered that it is an offense. You have invited me as a guest in your house, and before feeding me you are eating. What kind of host you are? I curse you, and I try to kill you. So Durvasa Muni created a fiery demon, and the demon went to attack Ambarish Maharaj. Ambarish Maharaj did not move even 1 inch also. Pleased with the devotion of Ambarish Maharaj, earlier the Supreme Lord Vishnu has given his Sudarshan Chakra to Ambarish Maharaj, and immediately Sudarshan Chakra came when this fiery demon was attacking Ambarish Maharaj. So Sudarshan Chakra has burnt that fiery demon to ashes, to nothing actually. The fiery demon was destroyed by Sudarshan Chakra, and later Sudarshan Chakra started chasing this Durvasa Muni also. And Durvasa Muni went to different places, and then finally, because of Vishnu's advice, Durvasa Muni had to come back and fall at the feet of Ambarish Maharaj, and Ambarish Maharaj offered prayers to this Sudarshan Chakra. Oh Sudarshan Chakra, please, in exchange of all my spiritual credits, protect this Brahmana Durvasa Muni. then Durvasa Muni's life was spared because I spoke this story in the context of the manifestation of Sudarshan Chakra. So Krishna's divine weapons also have this consciousness. They are also personalities. They can hear prayers. And Kaumodaki Gada of the Lord, in the third canto, 28th chapter, there is a beautiful description of Kaumodaki Gada. The shloka says, Kaumodaki Bhagavato Dayitam Smareta Digdhamarati Bhatashonita Kardamena Mala Madhuvrata Varutha Giropagushtham Chaityasya Tatvamamalam Manimasya Kanthe Kaumodaki Bhagavato Dayitam Smareta. This Kaumodaki Gada is extremely dear to the Supreme Lord because this Kaumodaki Gada is always tainted with the blood of the demons. Digdhamarati Bhatashonita Kardamena. So the Kaumodaki Gada is tainted with the blood of demons because the Lord's Chakra and Gada, these two are very much utilized by the Lord to kill the miscreants. And Shankha and Padma, these two are utilized by the Lord to please his devotees. So Shankha and Padma are for devotees, and Gada and Chakra are for the demoniac people. So like that the Lord uses different weapons for different purposes. And here the Supreme Lord Krishna invoked the presence of his divine transcendental weapons when Jarasandha came to attack Krishna in Mathura. So far Krishna did not use his weapons to kill the demons. Now Krishna has to use his weapons. And when Krishna came to Mathura also, just with his hands, as a 10-year-old boy, with his hands only, he killed Kuvalayapida. With his own hands, he has killed Shala, Toshala, Kuta, Chanura, Mushtika. Krishna and Balaram together killed all these 5 wrestlers. And Krishna killed with his own hands Kamsa. He did not use any weapons. And Balaramji killed the 8 brothers of Kamsa. They also did not use any weapons. He also did not use any weapons. But now the 23 Akshohinis of army has manifested in front of Dwaraka, in front of Mathura, Dham. So Krishna had to invoke the presence of his weapons. Now he has to fight with more sophisticated weapons in a more organized and professional manner. So Krishna invoked the presence of this chariot and other divine weapons. And Krishna and Balaram took only few soldiers, very little army. On one side there are 23 Akshohinis of armies of Jarasandha. As I told the figures of this Akshohini, 21,870 chariots, 21,870 elephants, 1,09,350 soldiers, 65,610 horses. These constitute one Akshohini of army, and like that there are 23 Akshohinis of armies. So in this way Jarasandha brought so many armies. Now Krishna's job is to reduce the burden of earth. He has to go out and search for all the miscreants, and then he would have to kill them. But Jarasandha is doing a great favor to Krishna by bringing all such miscreants right in front of Krishna's gate. So instead of Krishna going and searching for all these miscreants, Jarasandha is bringing all the miscreants right at the doorstep of Krishna. Krishna just have to step out of his main gate and kill all these people. So like that Krishna's job is made easy by Jarasandha. So Krishna and Balaram came out, and there was a huge fight between Krishna and Balaram. Before that fight, there was a huge argumentation between Krishna, Balaram and Jarasandha. Jarasandha said, "You boys, Krishna and Balaram, you have no affection, you are killing your own relatives." Basically, Krishna killed Kamsa, and Jarasandha is criticizing Krishna that Krishna, Kamsa is your maternal uncle, and you have killed your own uncle. How can you kill your relatives? But Jarasandha has forgotten the fact that Kamsa had killed his sister's sons, 6 small children he had killed. And Kamsa even tried to kill Krishna and Balaram also in a very organized manner by sending Keshi demon, by employing Kuvalayapida, by employing all these 5 wrestlers, and by he himself trying to attack Krishna and Balaram. Like that, Kamsa also tried to kill his relatives. But Jarasandha did not speak on the side of Krishna, he started speaking on the side of Kamsa. Oh Krishna, you are killing your own relatives. Are you not ashamed of this? You have killed your own maternal uncle. And then Krishna also replied back, and there was a lot of argumentation between Krishna and Jarasandha. And Krishna said, people who are warriors who came to fight would not waste their time in argumentation. Are you going to fight with me with only your words or with your weapons also? Jarasandha was enraged, and Jarasandha and all the 23 Akshohinis of armies that he brought, they all attacked these two young men, Krishna and Balaram. They are grown up now. They're not very small boys. They are quite grown up. So Krishna also fought, and the fight was described quite elaborately by Sukadeva Goswami. And in that fight, Krishna and Balaram, they sliced the bodies of all these 23 Akshohinis of armies. And the entire battlefield in front of Mathura Dham is filled with the dead bodies and the cut arms and cut legs and thighs and faces and heads of all these warriors. And the warriors came with golden ornaments, with their mukuta, with their necklaces, and with their bangles, with their bracelets. Like that, this army has come with a lot of decorations also. Krishna has smashed all those chariots, those elephants, those horses, and their bodies also. The arms were lying there in the pool of blood like snakes. The elephants were like islands. The collapsed elephants in the army, they were looking like islands in the pools of blood. And the dead horses were looking like crocodiles. And the hands and thighs of all these soldiers, they were looking like fish. And the bows were like waves. And the weapons were like clumps of bushes. And the chariot wheels were looking like whirlpools in this pool of blood. So Krishna and Balaram killed 23 Akshohinis of armies and created an ocean of blood in front of Mathura city. So this is common for Kshatriyas. It may seem very ghastly, very fearful, but the Supreme Lord Krishna is the abode of all rasas, and he sweetly reciprocates with his devotees in Vatsalya rasa, in Madhurya rasa, in Sakhya rasa, in Dasya rasa, and there are other people who may not be very devotional. So Krishna will display his Bibhatsa rasa, Bhayanaka rasa, Raudra rasa, Virya rasa also in front of them. He shows his chivalrous mood. He would counterattack them. He will kill them. He will slice their bodies and arms very effortlessly. So in this way, Krishna and Balaram killed all the soldiers and big warriors that Jarasandha has brought right in front of their city, Mathura. Then Balaramji, with his plow, started beating this Jarasandha, and at one point, Balaramji was about to kill Jarasandha. Then Krishna came and told Balaram, "My dear Balaram, why are you killing Jarasandha? Then Jarasandha is a miscreant. He has to be killed." Balaramji said. The Krishna said that no, 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 this is not the right time to kill Jarasandha. Jarasandha is very resourceful, and he is extremely inclined and bent upon gathering more and more armies and attacking Mathura city. Now he has brought 23 Akshohinis of armies, and now if we don't kill him and if we just release him, he would go back and he will prepare himself for a next war, and he will get more Akshohinis of armies. He will bring all those miscreants right in front of our doorstep, and we can kill them easily. So now, anyways, we have to kill all these kinds of materialistic people and demoniac people and bad kings, and we have to destroy all these military forces that are overburdening earthly planet. So Jarasandha is assisting us in this endeavor. So spare his life, just release him. And Jarasandha was released. So like that, the Lord very expertly, diligently, very smartly does all his pastimes. So he didn't have to take the effort of going everywhere. So all the miscreants are coming right in front of him. So in this way, Jarasandha was released by Balaramji. Balaramji did not kill Jarasandha. And Jarasandha had all his demoniac associates, all his ministers and soldiers, whoever survived, they started consoling Jarasandha. They gave counseling session to Jarasandha. Jarasandha, whatever happens in our life is because of our own past deeds. So it's because of our own karma. So now destiny just creates so many situations in our lives. Now somehow time is favoring Krishna and Balaram, and then Krishna and Balaram were victorious, and time did not favor you. But next time you can always gather armies, and then you can go and attack Krishna and Balaram, and later you can be victorious also. So in this way, uh, Jarasandha went back, and after some time, Jarasandha gathered some more armies, and he brought again several Akshohinis of armies, and he attacked Mathura city. Krishna and Balaram came in their divine chariots with divine weapons again out of Mathura city, and then they started fighting with Jarasandha's armies. And Jarasandha was again defeated. All his Akshohinis of armies are defeated. They were killed in the hands of Krishna and Balaram, and Jarasandha was again shown some mercy. Balramji and Krishna did not kill Jarasandha, and Krishna released Jarasandha. Jarasandha again went back. Like that, Jarasandha attacked Krishna and Balaram in Mathura city for 17 times, and all 17 times Krishna and Balaram would kill the armies that Jarasandha has brought in front of them, but they would spare the life of Jarasandha. Jarasandha went back. And 18th time also Jarasandha gathered a lot of army and then came to Mathura city. At that time, something special has happened. There was a king named Kalayavana. He was the king of Yavanas. So once this Kalayavana was a very powerful warrior, and he had special blessings from the demigods also. And Kalayavana had a very deep desire to fight with somebody. He was looking for somebody who can offer him a proper fight. So Kshatriyas have this kind of desires. Just like a scholar may want to argue with another scholar and try to defeat another scholar in an argument, in Tarka. Similarly, Kshatriyas have this inclination to fight with someone in a battle, and then they want to kill or defeat or gain victory over an enemy. That gives them some pleasure, Kshatriya pleasure, fighting pleasure. So he was always looking for a proper person who can give him a proper fight. And because Kalayavana was so powerful, whomever he was attacking, they were getting defeated or killed in the hands of Kalayavana. Kalayavana did not have a proper pleasure to fight only. He was looking for a proper combat. And just like Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu were the sons of Diti, and Hiranyaksha also had this Yuddha Kanduti, means he has very deep desire to fight with someone who is very powerful. So he was going everywhere searching for a proper combat. Then Hiranyaksha went inside the waters, inside the ocean, and then he went to Varuna's abode. And he fell at the feet of Varuna and begged, Varuna, my dear Varuna, I have to beg some charity from you. What is that? Then Varuna asked. Then Hiranyaksha said, can you please fight with me? I feel like fighting with somebody and I don't find anyone who is equal in fighting with me. Then Varuna expertly said that, oh my dear Hiranyaksha, I have become old now. I think I am not the right combat for you. You can find somebody who is better than me. I would suggest that you can fight directly with the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and he can offer you the best pleasure in fighting. Then Hiranyaksha started searching for Vishnu. So Narada Muni told where Vishnu would be. So Hiranyaksha went to Garbhodaka ocean to find Vishnu, and Lord Vishnu came in the form of Varahadev, in the form of a transcendental boar, and started fighting with Hiranyaksha. And he fought with Hiranyaksha for a long time, giving him fighting pleasure. And even the Lord also wants some fighting pleasure. So in the spiritual realm, the Lord cannot fight with his own eternal associates. It may not be very nice for him to fight with his own Vishnu Parshadas. So for that reason, to fulfill the transcendental desire of the Supreme Lord to fight with somebody, Jaya and Vijaya have been cursed to descend into this earthly planet, and Jaya and Vijaya became Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, and the Lord took the forms of Varaha and Narasimha and fought with Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Narasimhadev fought with Hiranyakashipu and killed him, and Varahadev fought with Hiranyaksha and killed him. So like that, the Lord also has a desire to fight with someone, and sometimes some Kshatriyas or Yavanas or demons, they also have a desire to fight with someone. So it's the natural tendency for someone who has some Kshatriya nature. So Kalayavana wanted to fight with somebody and he was not finding anyone. Anyone he was attacking, they are found to be less powerful than Kalayavana. So once Narada Muni met Kalayavana, and Narada Muni told, there is a powerful hero, a great warrior in Yadu dynasty. He is living in Mathura now. So if you go and attack uh, Krishna in Mathura, then your desire to fight with somebody who is equal to you would be fulfilled. So Krishna is the right person who can offer you a proper fight. So in this way, Kalayavana was very much inspired. He was so inspired to go and attack Krishna. So Kshatriyas derive a lot of pleasure in attacking people and then fighting with people. So Kalayavana gathered 30 million soldiers, means 3 crores of soldiers, such a huge army. So Kalyavana has gathered that much army and then he attacked the Mathura city. So Kalyavana was coming with 3 crore soldiers to attack Mathura, and Jarasandha also got his several Akshohinis of armies and then he also was attacking Mathura, and from two sides Mathura was being attacked. And Krishna and Balaram Krishna considered that, my dear Balaramji, so far last 17 times only Jarasandha was attacking us, and we could easily defeat all these 23 Akshohinis of armies brought by Jarasandha, and now only Jarasandha is not attacking us. There is Kalayavana also is attacking us, and Kalayavana has 3 crores of soldiers. So better we save our own Mathuravasis, we bring them to some other place, safe place, and then let's see how to deal with Jarasandha and Kalayavana. So Kalyavana was also coming, Jarasandha was also coming. So these Kshatriyas, they always have spies here and there. So whenever a Kshatriya or a kingdom is being attacked, spies would come and inform the residents, the king or the princes, so that they can make some necessary arrangements. So Krishna and Balaram could make some necessary arrangements even before Kalayavana and Jarasandha could reach Mathura. So they were about to reach. So Krishna then meditated, and he wanted to erect a city called Dwaraka Dham, in the Kushasthali Dvipa, in an island in the ocean named Kushasthali. So Krishna meditated and he invoked the presence of Vishwakarma. So Vishwakarma is the celestial architect. He is the architect of demigods. He would create such wonderful, magnificent buildings, mansions for the pleasure of so many demigods. And now Krishna has invoked the presence of Vishwakarma and then instructed him, Vishwakarma, you should go and build a very wonderful city, not a building, an entire city you have to manifest in the Kushasthali Dvipa in the ocean. Then Vishwakarma has built a very wonderful city overnight, and Krishna thought it wise to shift all the Mathuravasis to that new city called Dwaraka fort. So fort is in the middle of the ocean. How will they go? Now Krishna has to organize all chariots and many other bullock carts or whatever to bring all these people all the way from Mathura to Dwaraka, which is quite a distance, and so many hundreds and thousands of residents are there in Mathura. How to shift all of them? So Krishna, by his divine transcendental potency, can perform inconceivable activities which are not possible for ordinary people to perform. That's why Krishna's pastimes are superhuman, uncommon activities. All the Mathuravasis were sleeping in Mathura that night. They slept in Mathura, and when they got up from their sleep, they found themselves in Dwarkadham. So like that, during their sleep only, Krishna has shifted all the Mathuravasis to a safe fort in the middle of the ocean, and nobody can attack this fort at that time. So all these people were shifted to Dwaraka overnight, and Mathura did not have many people there. So Balramji was there, and also Kalyavana was there. Balaramji and Krishna were there. So Kalyavana was attacking Krishna, was about to come, and Jarasandha was also about to attack. So at that time, Krishna told Balramji, Balramji, you just be in the city, Mathura. So I will have to do something to uh, kill Kalayavana. So Kalayavana I cannot kill because there was a benediction for Kalayavana. Kalayavana, Shiva gave a benediction to Kalayavana's dynasty that Supreme Lord Vishnu would not kill anyone in the dynasty. He would not kill Kalayavana now, according to the benediction offered to that dynasty by Lord Shiva. So Krishna wanted to kill Kalayavana in another way. So he told Balramji, Balramji, you can just be in the city, in Mathura city, and all the Mathura Vasis were shifted to Dwarka Dham, and Dwarka Dham was manifested overnight by the Supreme Lord's divine potency and through this architect Vishwakarma. And Sukadeva Goswami also describes the grandeur and the majesty and the opulence of Dwarka city also. It was filled with several palaces and archways and beautiful marble walls and very wonderful gardens. Everything has been manifested overnight. So then very beautiful water reservoirs, and Dwarakadham is also filled with so many gardens that emanate such sweet fragrance from their flowers growing in those gardens. Like that, that city has been manifested in the middle of the ocean, and nobody can attack because it is in the middle of the ocean. Which soldiers and army would come there? So all the Mathura Vasis have become Dwarka Vasis now, and they are very safe there. And Balramji is there in Mathura city, guarding the city, and Krishna started going away from Mathura city. Then Kalayavana saw. So Krishna purposefully was going out of Mathura city in the vicinity of Kalayavana. Kalayavana was coming closer to Mathura, and Krishna was running away from Mathura city. And Kalayavana has already heard a description about the beauty of Krishna. Narada Muni described how Krishna is so beautiful. Krishna has very beautiful bluish bodily complexion. Krishna wears a wonderful peacock feather, and he wears pitambar, yellowish garments. So like that, Krishna's enchanting form has been described by Narada Muni with devotion from his side. And Kalayavana has heard that description, and then he recognized this must be Krishna. This is Krishna, and this is the warrior that Narada Muni spoke to me. And he must be Vasudeva. He is looking so divine and transcendental. So let me just go and chase him. He can give me the right fighting pleasure. And Kalayavana started chasing Krishna. And Krishna started running away. And Krishna was not invisible to Kalayavana. Krishna was running, and Kalayavana was trying to run behind Krishna. And every time Krishna would make a very safe distance between himself and Kalayavana. So Krishna was not fearful. Krishna was very playful. When Mother Yashoda was chasing Krishna in Vrindavan Dham, Krishna was fearful, because Mother Yashoda was trying to punish Krishna, bind Krishna. But when Kalayavana was chasing Krishna, Krishna was not fearful. Why? He has to be fearful. Kalatmanoyat pramadayut ashramah svatman rate khidyat hirudamiha. Krishna always performs wonderful, inconceivable activities. Now Krishna has attacked Jarasandha 17 times and killed his 23 Akshauhinis of armies. But now in this context, Krishna was not fighting with Kalayavana. Krishna was running away from Kalayavana. That's why he is called Ranachor. Ranachor means one who escapes from the battlefield. A Kshatriya should not show his back to the opponent, to the enemy. So when the enemy comes to attack a Kshatriya, Kshatriya wouldn't show his back to the enemy. Kshatriya would either die in the battlefield in the hands of enemy, or he would be victorious and he will kill the enemy. But he would never show his back. But here Krishna is showing his back and running away from Kalayavana. So, but when Krishna does such activities, although from common social external perspectives, that is not very appreciated. When a Kshatriya runs away from battlefield, that's not very appreciated. But when Krishna does it, Krishna is worshipped for his activities. He is called Ranachor. And Krishna, when he steals butter in Vrindavan, he is called Makhan Chor. Stealing is not a very wonderful activity, but when Krishna does it, it becomes a divine, transcendental activity that gives so much of pleasure to the devotees, and devotees worship Krishna as Makhan Chor or Ranachor. So Krishna is running away. And Krishna does such inconceivable and apparently contradictory activities. So there is a beautiful shloka spoken by Uddhava in the third canto of Bhagavatam that describes all such apparently contradictory activities of Krishna. So the shloka says that Krishna does not have any activity to do, but still he performs so many activities. Karmanyanihasya bhavo bhavasyate durgashrayotthari bhayatpalayanam kalatmano yat pramadayutashramah svatmanrate khidyati dhirvedamiha karmani anihasya bhavo abhavasyate. Means the Supreme Lord does not have any specific karma to perform. The karma means activity or prescribed duties are meant for the common human beings to follow. Krishna does not have any prescribed duty. He does not have any expectation of results from his own activities. He says, Namam karmani limpanti name karma phale spruha. I have no interest to perform any activities. But still, Krishna does so many activities. Karmani anihasya. He has no desires. Unless we have a desire to attain certain result, why would we perform any activity? So Krishna still performs so many activities. That's bewildering. Karmani anihasya bhavo bhavasyate. Krishna is unborn. He has no birth. But still he takes birth as the son of Devaki or Vasudeva or Yashoda or Nanda or Dasharatha or Kaushalya or Aditi and Kashyapa in the form of Vamana. So like that in his various incarnations he would take birth from somebody although he is unborn. Karmani anihasya, although he has no duty or activity to perform, he does so many activities. Although he has no birth, still he takes birth. Karmani anihasya bhavo bhavasyate durgashrayothari bhayatpalayanam. So Durgashrayo, he takes shelter in a fort. What is that fort? Dwaraka fort. Why? Bhayatpalayanam. So Adibhayatpalayanam. Adibhayat means because of fear of enemy. Here two enemies are there. Kalayavana and Jarasandha. Both were attacking Mathura, and Krishna took shelter in a fort called Dwaraka fort in the middle of the ocean as if he is fearful of these enemies. Not only he ran to this Dwaraka fort, Krishna was also running away from this Kalayavana. Kalatmano yat pramadayuta ashramaha. Although he is Kalatmana, he is the controller of time, he is running away from Kalayavana. How can the controller of time, who can cause the death of all living beings, how can he be fearful of death? How can he run away to protect his own life from a hideous demon like Kalayavana? Kalatmana is running from Kalayavana. So that's inconceivable. So the reason we will understand. So Krishna was running away. Kalatmano yat pramadayuta ashramaha svatmanrate. Next point of bewilderment is, he is svatmanrate. He takes pleasure in his own self. He is self-satisfied. He does not need anything beyond himself for his satisfaction. Kalatmano yat pramadayuta ashramaha svatmanrate. Although he is self-satisfied, he engages in household life and he enjoys pleasure in the association of so many wives, 16,108 wives. So, like that, Krishna performs so many apparently contradictory or bewildering activities. Khidyati dhirvidhamiha. So, by trying to understand these activities of Krishna, even very learned people also may get confused and bewildered. But Prabhupada writes in that purport that it is not very astonishing to understand Krishna's apparently contradictory activities. We may not understand the details, but in essence, Krishna does whatever he does to please his devotees. He does so many activities to please his devotees. Although he is unborn, he takes birth as the son of some of his devotees to please those devotees. And although he is Kalatmana, he runs away from Kalayavana for a reason that we will discuss now. And even while he is running away from the battlefield, he is still called as Ranachor, and he is worshipped for that activity. And he is taking pleasure in the household life with so many wives, just to reciprocate with their loving, devotional service attitude. Not that Krishna is greedy for the association of women. So, like that, whatever activities that Krishna performs in his Leelas, so they are divine, they are inconceivable, and they are ultimately meant for the pleasure of all his beloved devotees. So now in this context, Kalayavana was chasing Krishna and Krishna was running away from Kalayavana. So like that, Krishna directed Kalayavana. He ran, and as he was running, it's not that he was disappearing in front of Kalayavana. Kalayavana could see Krishna. So Krishna purposefully kept himself within the vision of Kalayavana so that Kalayavana would not give up chasing Krishna. So Krishna had to direct Kalayavana to a place so that Kalayavana could be killed. So Krishna was running, and he ran and went into a cave. And Kalayavana could see that Krishna must have entered this cave. So Krishna entered this cave and he hid in that cave. And Kalayavana also entered the cave trying to search for Krishna. And as soon as Kalayavana entered the cave, he saw a person sleeping there. He was lying down there with his cloth on top of him. So then Kalayavana thought that Krishna must have been tired by running so much. He must be sleeping here. So Kalayavana thought that this person was Krishna, and his Kalayavana started kicking that person who was sleeping there. And the person just got up and he opened his eyes. And as soon as the sleeping person just got up and then he rubbed his eyes and opened his eyes, his glances fell on Kalayavana, and Kalayavana was burned to ashes on the spot. And Krishna was hiding somewhere, and then he was watching the whole fun there. So Kalayavana was not meant to be killed in the hands of Krishna, because Kalayavana's dynasty has been blessed by Lord Shiva, that nobody in the dynasty would be killed by Krishna or Vishnu or the Supreme Lord. So Kalayavana, because Krishna cannot kill Kalayavana because of Shiva's benediction, Krishna has arranged this new person to kill Kalayavana. And the name of the person who has been sleeping and who just got up was Muchukunda. And we will see the story of Muchukunda in the next episode. Thank you all very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.